Lighter when you're ready.
Good. No, I mean
Oh.
Okay. Have you all ever heard of Marsyas, the satyr who was flayed alive by the god Apollo of music? He had his skin ripped from his body until he was nothing but a big, red, gaping wound. And whether you've heard of this story or not, you should know that it is actually an example of classical Greco-Roman mythological story. Having knowledge of Greco-Roman mythological stories and how they influence our society gives a better understanding of certain things that it relates to today. I know about this because I've been studying classical Greco-Roman societies for the past 3 years. I'm a classical studies minor. And today I'm going to discuss the purpose and history of classic Greco-Roman mythology. I'm going to discuss a story that represents both of these things and how this story has influenced modern society today. So how about a little background first? According to History Channel, Robert Graves, he's a classicist. Mythology serves two purposes. One, to explain the creation of the world, and two, to account for certain customs and beliefs in a certain society. These are both true, but there's also a third purpose, and that is to explain why something exists in nature. What we know about the history of mythology comes from people who lived during ancient Greek and ancient Roman time periods. So Hesiod, who is an ancient Greek poet, wrote Theogony, which is a very, very long poem that explains the creation of the world from a mythological background. It also explains the creation of the final generation of rulers, the 12 Olympian gods and the one non-Olympian god. So now that you know a little bit about the background of Greco-Roman mythology, I'm going to get to telling you about that story. So Greco-Roman stories openly represent certain beliefs held in the ancient societies. The story of Apollo and Daphne comes from this very long poem titled Metamorphosis by Ovid, who is an ancient Roman poet. And what happens in the story is pretty much Apollo, who's the god of music, archery, and art, and god of the sun, he insults Cupid, god of sexuality. And Cupid does not take this lightly, so he shoots Apollo with a golden arrow, which causes extreme infatuation. And he shoots Daphne, this nymph, with an arrow, a leaden arrow that causes repulsiveness. So Apollo falls in love with Daphne, but Daphne wants nothing to do with him. So he ends up chasing her through the forest, and she prays to her father that he will never be able to have her. So as she's running, her feet becomes one with the ground, and her long, slender arms reach out, and they become branches, and her beautiful flowing hair become green swaying leaves, and she's been turned into a tree. And Apollo is devastated, so he vows to her that he will always wear his leaves around, her leaves around his head. And Daphne, who is now a laurel tree, nods in agreement. So the story of Daphne and Apollo has two of the three purposes that I mentioned earlier. One, the Greco-Roman belief that insulting gods in any way is just a very bad idea, and also that hubris, which is excessive pride, is bad, which you see Apollo, when he insults Cupid, he's expressing hubris. And the second purpose, according to Greco-Roman mythology, Daphne was actually the first laurel tree. So I bet you wonder what this ancient story from the year 8 AD has to do with the modern world today. Well, we see many references to Greco-Roman culture in today's society. In relation to Daphne and Apollo, you have the sculpture that depicted the story by the Italian artist Bernini. You have the Apollo Space Program, which is named after Apollo because he's the sun god. You have the Apollo Theater in New York because he's the god of music and art. And also on the Boy Scouts of America Commissioner's badge, you have the laurel wreath that he wears from Daphne, and it represents victory. So to sum it up, Greco-Roman mythology has a very long history, and it once served as an explanation of how the world functioned to ancient Greeks and ancient Romans. And it still influences the modern world today. So in assuming that you all now understand how Greco-Roman mythology has influenced things that we value today, such as music, art, leadership roles, and science, I'm going to leave you with this quote by Michael Straczynski. He is an American producer and writer. And he says, the point of mythology is to point to the horizon and point back to ourselves. This is who we are, this is where we came from, and this is where we are going.